Hi everybody and welcome to Golden Hour, show about living your best life. Today I'd like to talk about a subject that's a little bit controversial, but it's very near and dear to my heart. I'd like to talk to you today a little bit about men's issues, men's rights, and how we're villainizing them in today's society. So if you'd like to hear a little bit about the struggles that men have in today's society, keep watching. Now, I'd like to put a little disclaimer in this. I am in no way stating that women do not have their crosses to bear and they do not have their claims against not having enough rights. I'm merely suggesting that in our way to empowering women, we don't need to take power away from men. This is really an issue of human rights, but we have turned the pendulum so far the other way that we are now starting to victimize men. And as mothers of sons, as sisters to men, as wives to men, as teachers who teach little boys, we have the responsibility in seeing that men don't get victimized. I read an article published last year on November 19th, which is National Men's Day, and it was an article that highlighted some of the things that men feel are disadvantages to them. And it was published in the Irish Times. One of the first things that men feel that they have going against them is that everyone expects a certain amount of stoicism from a man. That the pressures to be a man and be manly and keep it inside are overwhelming. So much so that sometimes men go to the men's room, not to use the men's room, but just to kind of break character and let their emotions out and not feel so drained. I think it's important from a very young age that we stop telling men to suck it up, to grow a pair, to be a man. Now, don't misunderstand me. I don't want to live in a world where we have droves of men who are feminists. But I do think it's important that we afford men the same luxury that we afford women. That it's okay to feel your emotions. It's okay to be sad. And to also let them know that it really takes strength to show that you're sad. It takes strength for a man to cry in front of you. And as women, we have a responsibility there. We say that we want emotionally available men. We say that we want this softer kind of guy that feels his emotions. But yet when they do that, we laugh at them, we belittle them. It is our responsibility as women to raise them up, to applaud them for their courage to show their true selves to us, not to make fun of them, not to belittle them. And so I think this starts when we have our little boys. And men are responsible for this too. You'll hear a man talk about their daughter, well, we have to protect her, she's our girl. But what about protecting our sons? There are so many things in this world that we need to protect our sons about, but it starts when they're young. If they get hurt and they cry, neither sex should be overreacting. They cry, they got a cut on their leg, we tell them it's going to be okay, we put a Band-Aid on it, and the crying should stop. It shouldn't be, you're a big boy, don't cry. And it shouldn't be, let your little girl carry on ridiculously. Because that's how you get over-emotional women, and that's how you get emotionally stunted men. It needs to be equal. A lot of men right now, as shown in this article, but also men that I've talked to, feel that people are holding them responsible for all the bad things that are going on in this world. And they're just not. There are plenty of wonderful men, there are plenty of wonderful women. Let's not highlight the bad ones. But also, let's take responsibility. as a society for the pressures that we put on our men, and as mothers for how we raise our sons and our grandsons. We have a responsibility. Later on in the show, I'm going to show you a clip from Jane Fonda, who is a feminist and a philanthropist, and what she has to say about our sons and grandsons. In this article, men also express that they feel that they can't have a problem, that the world is always sympathetic to women's problems, but men can't have problems, that women have a market on this. This is something we also need to address. They also feel that they have difficulty expressing their feelings because they feel that it makes them look weak. We need to make them understand that in expressing their feelings is actually showing that they're strong. It shows their strength. I'll never forget the time my dear, darling husband of 20 years, Eric, got the phone call that his best friend that he hadn't seen in a few years passed away, and he just broke down in tears. I never felt more love, more support, or more respect for the man in my life. The fact that he was able to let go and cry over his best friend spoke volumes to the kind of person he was. That he was a strong, 240-pound ex-college football player that played freshman football with Bubba Smith at Michigan State, a rough and tumble kind of guy who was able to cry, who took the day off from work to take my hamster to the vet because I was taking care of our child. And that 240-pound guy carried our little hamster in a carrying case to the vet and then proceeded to administer antibiotics to that hamster for a week with a little syringe. That takes strength. That is what we need to instill in our men, that it is okay to show your emotions. The other thing men feel that they're subjected to, and I agree, they feel that they are subjected to sexism. That if it was a woman having those sexual advances toward them, the men would either lose their jobs or be arrested. So it doesn't seem to be fair. I grew up in a time in the 60s and 70s where flirting in the workplace was more than acceptable. One guy stated that when he's walking, if he's walking at night and there are women 15 feet ahead of him, he will cut across to the other side of the road, as inconvenient as it may be, walk 15 feet in front of them, and then cut back. Because that is easier than trying to say to them, you know, I'm okay, I'm cool, I'm not going to bother you, and walk by. That's where we live today. A poor guy has to be afraid to even walk by a woman. They feel the pressure to pay for everything. I've heard this from many people that I know. As a woman who's not a feminist, I'm really okay with a guy paying for everything. I'll pay every once in a while, but, you know, I like the days when there was chivalry and there were old-fashioned values. But in today's day and age, where a lot of women make the same wages as a man, you know, it's unrealistic to expect that the poor guy pay for everything. Which brings me back to something my dear husband said way back in the day when we were first married, and not much has changed in the world. He said that a guy knows from the time he's very young that he doesn't have a lot of choice. That if he marries, he doesn't have a choice of whether or not he wants to stay home when they have children, but the woman always does. And even in two-income families, a lot of times you'll see the woman working lesser hours than the guy. I'm all for that, but I'm not a feminist. From a guy's standpoint, that puts a lot of pressure on them. They know that for the rest of their life, they have to support a family. They also knew back in the 60s and 70s that there was a draft and that they were going to be drafted in the military. It's something a woman knew she was never going to have to face. Again, there is no draft now, and some of these things will change, but the changes are slow and the pressures that are on men are immense. The last three things that the guys in this article felt that were disadvantages to them was they felt that they have to apologize for everything. They feel that in advertising they're depicted as dumb and lazy, and that in society not being into sports is a problem, especially as they relate to other men who are into sports. So here's my take. I think from the time they're little, as I said before, we need to tell little boys that it's okay to cry while still maintaining their sense of strength and masculinity. Both sexes should be strong. But again, when we empower women, we shouldn't emasculate men. I think women don't understand the advantages that we do have. I can go sit in a public park with a cup of coffee and watch the children play, and nobody thinks twice about it. I can approach anyone at a playground. In fact, I've made friends, women and children, and nobody really thinks anything of it because I'm a woman. But if a guy did that, people would be afraid that he was a creep or a pedophile. I think we need to understand that there are plenty of pedophiles that are women. And not everyone who sits in the park with a cup of coffee is there looking at the children. Sometimes we're just looking at the animals or the pond. We need to protect our children, but we also don't need to run scared every time there's a male around. I think that in schools, when women abuse boys sexually, where is the outrage? You'll hear men say, "Where were teachers like that when I was growing up?" It isn't funny. A woman who sexually abuses a person should be treated just as harshly as men who sexually abuse people. And right now, based on social media and based on the comments I see, people laugh when a boy gets abused. People laugh when a man gets abused in a marriage. Now, it doesn't make the man weak. Consider this. A woman hits her husband. What happens if he retaliates? He goes to jail. So his only choice is to sit there and take it, and then people call him weak for letting a woman abuse him. Oh, he could divorce her, that's true, but what happens when he divorces her? He loses half his stuff, and if they have children, he doesn't get to see his kids every day. So the system really, really favors the woman in so many cases. For a woman to lose her child in court, to lose custody, she has to be really terrible. She has to be a drug addict to lose her children. A man, he doesn't have to do all that much to lose custody. And when the woman gets her life back on track, she's given custody back, or at least equal custody. We need to change that in family court. Kids deserve both their parents. That's a whole other show. And along with the Me Too movement, which, don't get me wrong, I think that all of these women, if they're truly abused, should seek retribution or to have the men punished. But I don't think you should bring up something that happened 30 years ago and try it based on today's standards. Because when we were growing up in the 60s and 70s, flirtation, catcalling, making a pass at someone was acceptable. I'm not saying it was right, but it was acceptable. It was the way of the times. And to bring today's standards into what happened 20 or 30 years ago is wrong. That is why there's a statute of limitations on so many things. But in the public eye, these people are destroyed. So I think going forward, we all know the social rules now. And now, if you don't follow them, then yes, you can be held liable for your actions. But we can't turn the clock back. We can't fix those things. And we can't prosecute people for things that we went along with. You see a lot of these Me Too, and you see that the person was willing participant because they thought they were going to get ahead in life by doing it. You can't turn around and regret what you did and hold the other person liable. The other thing that really bothers me is that if two people are intoxicated and they sleep together, the man can be held accountable for rape. But if he was intoxicated too, and they had sex, why can't she be held accountable for rape? See, it needs to go both ways. Either you're both accountable and responsible for having sex, or if you're both intoxicated, neither of you are. So women out there, I'm asking you, instead of saying you're a feminist, let's be humanists. Let's make everyone equal. Let's not make anyone feel powerless. Let's raise our boys to be strong in mind and body and spirit so that their head and their heart are connected. And here's a clip from Jane Fonda talking just about this.
How we raise our sons or our grandsons is going to make a huge difference for tomorrow. I know we're going to talk a lot about girls tomorrow, but I just want to put in a plug for us doing everything we can to keep our sons and grandsons emotionally literate, to keep them connected head to heart. And it's really hard because I work with adolescents, and the boys who have remained hooked up are in a not safe place. They're called sissies and pansies and mama's boys, and they don't know anymore when they're sad. They don't know why they're doing a lot of what they're doing, you know, like sex and drugs and booze and this and that. It's because they're depressed. They lose emotional literacy. We have to raise sons who are capable of intimacy and love and compassion and empathy.
I hope you found value in this episode. I hope if you're a male, you will reach out, and if you have a problem that you want discussed, you put it in the comment section and I'll look into it and talk about it. And I think these are things we need to have open conversations about between the sexes. And men, here's a call to you. Don't belittle your men friends for not liking sports or for being emotional and being able to express their feelings. Instead, raise them up. Women, don't ask for an emotionally available, emotionally connected mind, head to heart male, and then laugh at him or use it against him or belittle him. This is the only way we're going to see change. Men, we don't want you to be afraid of us. We want to coexist. We want a peaceful world. And let's let the healing begin here. So if this episode helped you in any way, or it resonated with you in any way, click like, click subscribe, click share, and go start hugging each other and not being afraid to express it. Peace out. I love you all.